Specifically, this module will help the learners describe distinctive musical elements of the given musical pieces in the 20th century styles, identify known musical composers in 20th century music, as well as to determine the following musical styles in 20th century and listen and understand to the different characteristics of 20th century music. Learners are also expected to know the significant similarities and differences of the 20th century music from the other art forms of the same period, as they identify the uniqueness of each art form in relation to music and perform or create a short musical video of the relationship of the 20th century music from other art forms using different mobile apps. Impressionism. One of the earlier but concrete forms declaring the entry of 20th century music was known as Impressionism. It is a French movement in the late 19th and early 20th century. The sentimental melodies and dramatic emotionalism of the preceding Romantic period, their themes and melody are easy to recognize and enjoy, were being replaced in favor of moods and impressions. There is an extensive use of colors and three effects, vague melodies, and innovative chords and progressions leading to mild dissonances. Characteristics of Impressionism music. First is the use of whole tone scale in music, a scalar arrangement of pitches, each separated from the next by a whole tone step, or whole step. Then, in terms of harmony, chords overlapped lightly with each other to produce new subtle musical colors. Next in chords did not have a definite order and a sense of clear resolution. Other features include the lack of a tonic-dominant relationship, which normally gives the feeling of finality to a piece, moods and textures. Next, harmonic vagueness about the structure of certain chords. Lastly, most of the Impressionist works centered on nature and its beauty, lightness, and brilliance. Expressionism. The term Expressionism was originally borrowed from visual art and literature. Artists created vivid pictures, distorting colors and shapes to make unrealistic images that suggested strong emotions. Expressionist composers poured intense emotional expression into their music and explored the subconscious mind. Characteristics of Expressionism music. 1. Use of 12-tone scale in music, a type of serial music introduced by Arnold Schoenberg, uses a tone row formed by the 12 semitones of the chromatic scale, and inverted or backward versions of the row. Synonyms: 12-tone music, 12-tone system. 2. In terms of harmony, it shows high level of dissonance, obviously resulting into atonality. 3. Use distorted melodies and harmonies, constantly changing texture and extreme pitches. 4. Extreme contrast of dynamics. 5. Angular melodies with wide leaps and no cadence. 6. Shows radical emotion or negative expression like radical, fear, anxiety and anger. 7. Introduce atonality, which means lacking tonal center, or key. Neo-classicism. Neo-classicism was a moderating factor between the emotional excesses of the Romantic period and the violent impulses of the soul in Expressionism. It was a partial return to an earlier style of writing, particularly the tightly knit form of the classical period, while combining tonal harmonies with slight dissonances. It also adopted a modern, freer use of the 7-note diatonic scale. First, freer use of the 7-note diatonic scale, any sequence of 7 successive natural notes, such as C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and any transposition thereof, is a diatonic scale. 7-note diatonic scale. Second, partial return to conventional way of Romantic music combined with Expressionism characteristic. Lastly, the use of harmonic dissonances that produce harsh chords and complex but exciting rhythmic patterns. Avant-garde. Closely associated with electronic music, the avant-garde movement dealt with the parameters or the dimensions of sound in space. The avant-garde style exhibited a new attitude toward musical mobility, whereby the order of note groups could be varied so that musical continuity could be altered. Improvisation was a necessity in this style, for the musical scores were not necessarily followed as written. For example, one could expect a piece to be read by a performer from left to right or vice versa. Modern nationalism. A looser form of 20th century music development focused on nationalist composers and musical innovators who sought to combine modern techniques with folk materials. It can be also referring to musical ideas or motifs that are identified with a 5 specific country, region, or ethnicity, such as folk tunes and melodies, rhythms, and harmonies inspired by them. Electronic music. As 20th century acquired new technology, the capacity of electronic machines such as synthesizers, amplifiers, tape recorders, and loudspeakers to create different sounds was given importance. The presence of those electronic machine that is useful in creating music was taken advantage by some musical composer and create a new distinctive style. Musique concrete is one of its features. Is a type of music composition that utilizes recorded sounds as raw material, or composer records different sounds that are heard in the environment, such as the bustle of traffic, the sound of the wind, the barking of dogs, the strumming of a guitar, or the cry of an infant. These sounds are arranged by the composer in different ways, like by playing the tape recorder in its fastest mode or in reverse. In musique concrete, the composer can experiment with different sounds that cannot be produced by regular musical instruments such as the piano or the violin. Chance music. Chance music refers to a style wherein the piece always sounds different at every performance because of the random techniques of production, including the use of ring modulators or natural elements that become a part of the music. Most of the sounds emanate from the surroundings, both natural and man-made, such as honking cars, rustling leaves, blowing wind, dripping water, or a ringing phone. As such, the combination of external sounds cannot be duplicated, as each happens by chance. During the 20th century, there was a large increase in the variety of music that people had access to. Prior to the invention of mass-market gramophone records, developed in 1892, and radio broadcasting, first commercially done 1919 to 1920, permitted bands to hold large concerts where even those with the least expensive tickets could hear the show, which were too expensive for many lower-income people. Impressionism and symbolism sought to avoid explicit meaning in painting and poetry. Painters explored the idea that the ways that external objects really look depends upon conditions of light and weather, plus the state of mind of the observer. Poets sought to write poems rich in ambiguous imagery. Composers, most notably Claude Debussy, sought to translate these ideals into musical expression. Impressionism is principally a French phenomenon, although Spanish, Italian, and American composers contributed important examples. Expressionism extends to the point of abnormal psychology, the fascination that many romantic composers felt about heightened emotional states. Essentially a phenomenon of German and Northern European culture, this artistic movement owes much to the studies of the unconscious mind undertaken at this time by the Viennese physician Sigmund Freud. Primitivism may have a different meaning in the visual arts from that in music. Primitive paintings may be those created by artists outside academic circles. Their lack of educated technique often resulted in an artistic vision or expression that was of great originality and interest. Another use of the term primitivism in art refers to the choice of primitive subjects, or the deliberate adoption of a style similar to that of unschooled artists. Primitivism in music rarely suggests lack of conventional technique. Rather, it seeks to express ideas or images related to antiquity or to some primitive culture or attitude. Some important composers. Claude Debussy, 1862 to 1918, is one of the most creative minds in the history of Western European music. His exquisite sense of color, harmony, and melody opened up alternatives to the musical thought dominated by the Central Europeans for more than a century. Igor Stravinsky, 1882 to 1971, is a central figure in 20th century music. Although his early career is characterized by his big ballets which epitomize primitivism, he composed important works in many styles. His influence on other composers has been incalculable. Arnold Schoenberg, 1874 to 1951, is another key figure in 20th century music. However, he is most well known for his development of the so-called 12-tone technique, which he developed after the period considered in this unit.